definitely send you those links. But we can go ahead and open this up.
Cool. Yeah, so we are on episode 2 of the Human Element podcast. Nick chose this topic, which I love, which is why nutrition is so damn hard.
So damn hard.
So damn hard. So yeah, I'm Blair. I'm a registered dietitian. We got Nick, who's an RD2B, and we are going to discuss why it's just becoming increasingly more difficult to find access to good nutrition information, why it seems like every other week you are learning, that this is good or bad, or something else is the devil or the angel that's going to save your life, or, I just feel like even being a professional, I hear constantly where it's like, if you do that, it's going to kill you. And then 2 weeks later, it's the only thing that you should do to be healthy and things like that. So we're going to try to tackle some of those back and forth misconceptions and talk shop.
Yeah. I think too, as soon as you get into the field of nutrition, you start to see it more. Not only because, you can identify what's bullshit and what's not. Well, some nutrition professionals can identify what's bullshit and what's not. But it seems like people bring more stuff to you because I believe it was Blair who was talking about it previously. They want to validate this idea that they found on Facebook, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, like, we've talked about it. Nick and I are both on, although I've kind of started backing off of Clubhouse a little bit because it's the new social media, and I like it because there's no takes. It's not like Instagram where you get to take the picture 1,000 times until your butt looks the best, or Photoshop it and edit it to the point where it's exactly what you want. If you don't know your shit, you don't have time to look it up. So, you got to answer right then, so it's one take. It's very organic, but you do have a lot of people still spreading misinformation. But we've talked about it on there, and I'll talk about it on here. But the point of doing your research, is to try to prove yourself wrong. The point of research in general is try to prove the hypothesis wrong. You throw as much as you can at the hypothesis to make it fail. If it does not fail, then I won't say it's proven, but it's confident that is a confirmed intervention. So basically if 95% of the time it still succeeds despite everything you throw at it, then you've got something with some merit behind it. Well, that should be your approach when looking up information. Instead of, if you're interested in veganism being healthy, you should try your hardest to find out why veganism is not healthy. And if it still seems healthy despite that information, then go ahead with it. And across the board, whether it's supplements, a diet, or whatever, you should be looking into why it sucks more so than why it's great, because you already think it's great. You need to be trying to convince yourself that it's not. And I think that's one of the problems, is that almost anything can be convincingly sold as awesome with the right motivational speaker behind it. I'm not trying to compare pseudo nutrition experts to Hitler by any means, but Hitler had a lot of people following behind him on something that wasn't, I'm Jewish, so it's, something that wasn't exactly, the greatest of movements, but he was a very intelligent motivational speaker, and he convinced a lot of people to fall in line with that. So it's very easy to convince people that something sounds awesome without backing it up. So we should don't be like Hitler and try to prove yourself wrong.
That's a nice little tagline there. Don't be like Hitler, guys. Just period. Don't be like Hitler.
Don't be like Hitler.
But the problem, one of the biggest problems with nutrition is, this is something that Blair said previously to me, at least, was that everybody eats, so everybody has an opinion on food and nutrition. And that's probably one of the issues that keeps this misinformation hanging around. Combine that with not wanting to be wrong and, validating your bias everywhere from, Googling, just doing a regular Google search and finding articles that support what you think, avoiding the ones that don't, all the way up to research. We discussed last time, sometimes that confirmation bias attempts to make its way into the research, and sometimes it gets all the way through. So that's really probably the hinging aspect of why nutrition misinformation is just a revolving door. It just keeps coming around.
Yeah,
But
well, people would rather be right than correct.
mhm.
You know, and I know that sounds like you're arguing semantics, but you know, if you are just focused on making sure that what you believe is correct instead of finding the correct information, then that's a problem. You know, you're trying to be right, and it's, you know, there's definitely issues with people saying sensational things that have no merit or science. And now, you know, people are just, gluten is the demon. Gluten's the ultimate bad guy now, like more so than anything else. It's gluten, you know, like whether you hate carbs or not, you still hate gluten, you know. And someone the other day had a post that said, if you're suffering from depression, the first thing to cut out is gluten. And this guy has thousands of followers. There are hundreds of engagements on this post. And it's just like, excuse me? Like, there's no science that a gluten intolerance exists, let alone that, you know, it has an effect in depression. Like, I mean, and we keep seeing these statements, post profiles that say things like food is medicine, movement is medicine. No, they're not. They're specifically not fucking medicine, you know. And the problem with it is there's actually very strict laws on calling medicinal benefits to tying it to food, because if you decide to pursue a food intervention instead of medicine that could save your life, then you die. That's a huge problem. And it's, to me, saying that, like, I think it's not quite as egregious, but it's like saying that prayer is going to heal you. Prayer is not going to do anything. I don't care if you're religious or not. You're not going to pray anything away. You know, you might pray for strength for the medicine to take its effect and not affect you in a hugely negative light. There might be nutritional interventions, like very specifically the one I can think of is vitamin C in cancer. The research shows that high doses of vitamin C can reduce the negative effects of cytotoxic agents, which would be chemotherapy. Well, that's not saying that vitamin C cures cancer. It just makes it a little easier for the medicine to work without affecting you negatively. You know, so food is preventative. Movement is preventative. If you do those things early, you're less likely to get cancer. But first off, there's no cure to cancer. So anybody that sells you on a cure to cancer is like, cancer doesn't cure, it remisses. So once you're diagnosed diabetic or with cancer or certain diseases like that, you are never free of those diseases. They're remissed. They're no longer affecting your life, but you still have a high propensity for those things to return. Once diabetic, always diabetic. Your diabetic just goes into remission to where it's no longer affecting your life. Or controlled, I think, is actually the term they use for diabetes. But, you know, I think that's an important distinction to make. But, you know, it's just, we have these bold statements that don't really mean anything coming from people that don't know what they're talking about. And then people latch on because it sounds great. And then they start spreading it because this bozo said it. And all of a sudden it's this self-fulfilling prophecy where one idiot spoke too loudly and now the whole world is regurgitating his garbage. And I think that's kind of like the initial effect that we see with a lot of this misinformation that gets spread around.
And I do want to play a little bit of the devil's advocate as we talk shit about people on this. You know, I don't think most of it's malicious. The marketing and all, definitely malicious. You're trying to get profit. But a lot of people just want answers. And so the issue comes when the actual science and medicine doesn't have an answer. Let's take insulin resistance as an example. We don't truly know why insulin resistance happens. We don't know exactly how it happens. We know pieces and portions of it, but we don't know for sure. So that's why you have different models, such as like my belief before I became a nutrition major was that your body would downregulate the insulin receptors. Well, one of my courses this semester turned out that's not true. the insulin still binds. We just believe there's an issue between getting the GLUT4 transport to the cell surface, which is what we believe the issue is, but that could even be something different. So the crazy thing is we know these things are happening and we don't know why. And that's what creates a disconnect between the science and the general public, because everybody wants answers. Like there's got to be definitive answers. And again, part of the issue is we hold science in such a high regard. Like science is the pursuit of knowing everything and categorizing it. So we tend to assume that science knows a lot more than it does, just because it can treat things based off of a model. And one thing I heard from a PhD, Dr. Eric Helms, I believe it was him who said it, was that all models are useful. No model is perfectly correct. So,
yeah. And I do agree. Like, it's not necessarily done with malice, although you might argue that, you know, making a statement that isn't founded in science is malicious towards true knowledge. You know, it's saying that cutting out gluten is how you cure depression is malicious towards gluten. I mean, that kind of stuff. But so it's malicious towards the actual knowledge. It's not done intentionally. I get it. But at the same time, making statements that people are going to grab on to the wrong part of a lot of messages. I had a guy earlier today saying something like, oh, you know, once you pass around 150 grams of carbohydrates, they start converting to fat and blah, blah. And he's a doctor. He understands biochemistry. But when we started calling him out to the 150 grams thing, he was like, well, obviously that's just like a jumping off point. I'm like, well, the problem is when you say 150 grams of carbohydrates, we as professionals are adhering to that number and having problems with it. You don't think some random person hears that and they're like, oh, I can't go over 150 grams of carbohydrates. You know, the same guy brought up Mtor and aging. And so Mtor is the pathway in the muscle that is responsible for muscle growth. All muscle cells, whether it's organic muscle, organ muscle, or skeletal muscle, responds to a growth pattern through the Mtor pathway. And there has been, Dr. Rhonda Patrick promotes this, but if you look into the research, it's saying there's a lot of things, models saying that overstimulation of Mtor decreases the aging cycle. It causes a reduction, like life longevity is longest with limited Mtor activation. Well, the problem with that is those are all rodent studies. You know, just like cancer, we don't have a ton of really solid human intervention cancer studies because nobody wants to be a part of the control group or the experimental group, whichever one has the least likely life longevity or health outcome. It's not sound to put somebody through something that may not work when there's something that we know can work. So we aren't rodents. We'll say it 100 times. Like, you can't apply the fact that rats don't live as long. Rats don't live more than 3 years. So looking at their life longevity because of Mtor pathways is not transferable to humans. Am I saying that the science isn't there? No, but I am saying the science is there. I'm not saying that it might not be true. Overstimulation of Mtor might cause a decrease in life expectancy. But we don't know that. And you can't turn around and say things like that because people will adhere to it like it's true. And we don't know that it's true. And if we don't know something is true, you cannot sell it like it is.
and that's really the difference between like malicious misinformation and non-malicious misinformation. So going back to the guy who said the first thing you should do when you're depressed is cut out gluten, that probably leans more towards malicious misinformation, because let's say you have depression because you're not making as much serotonin as your brain needs. Well, a decrease in serotonin correlates or causes a little bit of a disclaimer. Correlations and causation is not the same thing. I just don't remember off the top of my head whether it's correlates or causes. But anyway, decreases in serotonin correlate or cause a increase in carbohydrate intake. So when somebody's depressed and they cut out gluten and they still feel like shit, then they go into this vicious cycle. And so that's a way really for the person who's promoting that misinformation to blame shift. Be like, well, you know what? You're depressed. You have less serotonin. I told you to cut out gluten. You're eating more carbohydrates than before. Like, this is your fault. This isn't my fault. That borderlines or is malicious misinformation. But like Blair was saying, the doctor who just really doesn't know because science doesn't know, that would be something that's non-malicious.
Right. And so I think, just to kind of go in at the whole, like, there's a lot of misinformation that's being spread currently about gluten. I think that's a big one. And I think I'm glad you brought up serotonin, because there's a lot of things where like 80 or 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut, which is true. However, that's non-bioactive serotonin. It has to enter the blood-brain barrier and go into the brain to be activated, to be utilized as a neurotransmitter. Just because it's made in the gut does not mean it's a usable piece of or usable chemical or usable piece of the neurotransmission pathway for the multitude of effects that serotonin has in our system. So just because it's made there doesn't mean that it's doing anything until it enters the brain and becomes activated. Well, gluten is becoming the bad guy due to, and I have the phrase, it's not the gluten, it's the glutton. But when you reduce gluten, you typically reduce a lot of processed carbohydrates. Most of the bread consumed in this country does not have yeast in it. It is made to last and last on the shelf. And that comes with preservatives like transglutaminase, which in the industry is termed meat glue. It is what is used to bind fish flakes together to make K-Rab, or the imitation crab products. So this kind of stuff doesn't have to be put on the label, but it is a super inflammatory and highly unnatural thing for us to be consuming that allows bread to last as long as it does. Instead of using yeast, which is expensive and has a short shelf life, we use these other leavening agents and shelf-stable products to make bread last. Well, if you're getting your gluten from bread that you made at home, or from the local bakery that has yeast as one of the ingredients and is a nice, well-made and healthy piece of bread, gluten has no negative effects. There are no, so when I said that there's no such thing as gluten intolerance, there's never been a study that confirms a negative reaction to gluten. And if you think that because you took an at-home food sensitivity test and it said gluten on there, well, that's another piece of misinformation. Food sensitivity tests are bullshit. If you want to do a quick search, every major immunology board, whether it's Canada, US, EU, Australia, South Africa, and you name it, have come out and said that they don't tell you anything other than foods you eat most frequently. It is not IgE are your food allergies. These IgG at-home food sensitivity tests are utter trash. They do not tell you anything other than food. And so why do you think the most commonly eaten foods, eggs, gluten, and dairy, are the most commonly inflammatory foods? They're not. They are the most commonly consumed, and that's what those tests tell you, or what foods are commonly consumed. So the studies have shown that people were placed on different types of diets, and they had everyone, whether they had gluten in their diet or not, that thought they were eating gluten, had higher subjective negative effects from their diet. And when they were placed on a low FODMAP diet, all their negative feelings subsided. So it might be a FODMAP sensitivity. It might be psychosomatic. But unless you have a gluten allergy, which is celiac, you do not have a sensitivity to gluten. It is the types of foods you are eating more. Unless the science comes out and changes that, it's made up. It's a term that people have decided that they went from eating boxes of pasta and these highly processed garbage breads that have no business lasting. Bread should last 2 to 3 days, maybe a week. As a matter of fact, beer was invented to make bread more shelf stable. That was the point of beer, was turning it into a liquid form so it was easier to transport and lasted longer, because they fermented it into a drinkable beverage. So looking at the quality and how long your food lasts, the longer a food that's supposed to be perishable lasts, the less good it is for you. It's either highly salted or has things added to it to make it last that long. But because of all this lack of understanding, we have come to this term that gluten is the bad guy, and not looked at well, maybe it's the way that we're eating, the processed foods we're eating, that's causing this dip in serotonin at the gut level. Maybe we think that because we're fat and unhappy, if we cut out gluten and lose weight, then our depression will subside. Depression's not that easy, but you get these grandiose statements that are not rooted in science or even logical understanding. It's just something that someone is saying to sell you, and people buy into it. Unfortunately, telemarketers exist because some idiots out there are buying what they're selling. And that's kind of what's happening to the nutrition world.
Yeah, and I want to take a quick tangent off of that to talk about those genetic tests for food sensitivities. I had in my medical nutrition therapy course that I'm in right now, we came across nutrigenomics. It was actually the second module of the course. I was really excited. I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to learn about how different bioactive compounds, vitamins, things like that affect your genes, upregulate, downregulate. I was really excited. The science isn't there yet. And that's basically what the lecture was. The lecture was talking about the Human Gene Project, which all of your biology classes review at least once for your entire biology career. So it was that. And then, here's a couple of the genes that we do know they have an association with things like obesity or atherosclerosis, things like that. But really, in essence, the whole lecture was, this isn't something that it's where we can make definitive statements such as, you're genetically predisposed to this sensitivity or that sensitivity. But it is something that we kind of do expect to come, but that's going to be in like 10, 20 years. I mean, there's so much research that has to go into that. It might even be like 25 or 30 years before we have something like that. But the point is, those gene tests that are so bullshit, they're bullshit because science doesn't know. And they're claiming to know something that science doesn't, which they're also like citing said science to back themselves up. It makes no sense. Like, their product is bullshit because it is, simply. But
Yeah.
tangent over.
No, and I like that, because I think the difference is a lot of times people use pseudoscience or a very minimal understanding of the science at large to try to affirm that they are smarter than you. And I think this is identifiable when people say something sensational but can't give an explanation as to how or why that happens. When people say things that speak over your head but can't explain it in a sound manner that, an elementary schooler could understand. If you truly understand the information at hand, you should be able to dumb it down to where anybody could understand what you're talking about, as long as they actually understand the language you're using. So I don't mean that like, a 2-year-old who doesn't really have a grasp on English should be able to understand nutrition concepts. But if I can't explain some of the science and understanding of, the supplements I promote, or the, nutrition pathways that I agree with, or the diets I don't, if I can't explain to someone in 5th, 6th grade middle school why I don't think that those are the best things on the planet, or why I do think they're so great, then I don't know what I'm talking about. I know what I've read and I'm trying to regurgitate. And Nick and I have both experienced where people talk about like cellular age testing, and they just say things like, I went from a plus 19 to a -2 to and it's like, what does that even mean? You're just saying shit that sounds fancy, and it's name dropping. It's talking like, oh, so-and-so and so. No, I don't know these fucking people. Like, I'm here talking to you. I don't need like your validation that you know these other people. I need you to talk to me about what the fuck you're talking about right here in front of me. And I think that's one of the big problems, is that people, and actually Nick called me out on having imposter syndrome, where like people have that so consistently and hardcore that they think they have to act like they're selling themselves to like a conference that they're attending or something like that, instead of just knowing what they're talking about. If you're good at your job and you know how to explain it and you know what you're doing, you don't have to sell yourself to your boss every day or to the people listening. They're just going to know.
Exactly. And, referencing a professional is great. You know, that's a nice tool. However, that can't be your only understanding, is based off of someone else's interpretation. That's how we got to this point of intense misinformation, especially when it comes to like internet articles. I was talking to somebody about they were talking artificial sweeteners. They were talking about, oh, how bad it is for you. And I was asking them, okay, well, let's find some evidence. And they linked me a bunch of different internet articles that had citations. And so I did go in, find some citations or some articles that were studies in humans, and also dove into the citations that their articles cited. And the articles were just completely twisted. They were drawing conclusions that the article wasn't even attempting to conclude. And for instance, one example is Healthline. Healthline did that a lot. Healthline.com. It's like, cool, it has health in the name, but you're still somebody who's possibly not a scientist writing an article. They're not looking that deep. And then some of their claims weren't even cited. So it's one of those, you have to be able to interpret the information before you can promote the information, and lean on professionals sometimes. It's a tool. It can't be your only tool.
Right. Like I remember the same thing happened with me in the carnivore diet. Someone was promoting carnivore diet, and they sent me this article that sounded very convincing. But when you looked at the research, you know, they made a statement and then they had 2 or 3 citation numbers above it, which to some people, they just see the citation and like, well, this person did their research, so it has research. It's thumbs up. But when I looked at the studies, they would make a claim as to why the carnivore diet was healthy, but that study was not on the carnivore diet. It was only on that one component that they were promoting. So it was talking about high fat, saturated fat meat consumption, and it was a keto study. It wasn't a carnivore study. It was a keto study, you know, and that happened across the board because there's no confirmed positive carnivore studies. They Frankensteined this information together based on all these other studies to say what they wanted it to. Yes, if you look at each component of what is part of this carnivore diet, there's probably some merit to it. But when you look at the carnivore diet as a whole, there's no information. This is somebody just finding things that say what they want it to. And I can tell you right now, for every study you find that says that keto or vegan or whatever it is the best thing on the planet, I bet you I can find one that says it isn't. And that's the truth, is why we're saying that you need to do your due diligence. Look to be wrong. Look to prove yourself wrong, is because there's always 2 sides to every coin, and how the study is designed is as important as what the study says. And even furthermore, the lack of results is not the lack of information. No result is not no information. You know, so you could test something and nothing happens. Well, you still gain information from that. It's just not saying that this thing does the thing. It's saying that it doesn't. And that's information, you know? So like, I think that's part of the problem is, even in research or in article writing, people want sensationalism, and sensationalism will beat science every time. It's sexy. It's fun. It's what people want to hear, you know? But if I just walked around all day long and told people that they had randomly won $1 million, a lot of people are going to initially be very happy with me. And then none of them get their $1 million, and they realize what sensationalism does to the world. You know, that's what nutrition's getting to at this point, where it's like, I have the answer to all your problems. This one diet is going to help everybody lose weight, you know, and just pay attention to the way people speak. How do you feel about intermittent fasting? And people are like, I like intermittent fasting. No, that's not what I asked. You know, what is the science behind intermittent fasting? As a professional, as someone who claims to have research, I'm not asking if you fucking like it. I'm asking you what the research says and what data you can provide to me that shows whether or not that this is better for me than my current style of eating, or what the benefits, what's the merit of going through this dietary protocol versus what I'm currently doing.
And I think this little piece is a good segue into our next topic, which is like the hierarchy of bullshit. Where does bullshit start, and where does it get its work? Where is it at its worst? And going back to these articles that they have maybe 1, 2, maybe even 3 citations that they have linked to in the article, Healthline is a perfect example of kind of trying to hide their citations from you. They do have those little hyperlinks. You can click it and it'll pull up a box. It'll say, this came from PubMed Central. This is a trusted source. And that's all it'll say. You actually have to click through to go to the scientific article in order to figure out what the article's saying. So they're trying to get clicks. They're trying to get people to read their article and believe that they're credible. And when they're not, they're hiding it from you. They're trying to make sure you don't realize that they're credible. For instance, you're like, oh, you know, they've got a citation here. Let me check what it is. And it just says, came from PubMed. This is trusted. If you're not really into going into the article and figuring it out, you're going to go, oh, cool, that's probably right. I don't know how to read a scientific article. And you're going to move on. And they did their job well. But that's part of misinformation. And that would be a great example of malicious misinformation. They're just trying to get...
I think too with that, like, if you do click on the article and it takes you to the site and you can't access the full article, there's a decent chance they didn't either. You know, unless it's a source that you know consistently puts out solid citations, gives you the full list of citations, and the information doesn't seem overly sensational or hard to swallow, I really doubt that they're paying for every single person that writes for them to have access to all these PubMed articles, because it gets expensive. PubMed is a meta search for articles, and then they're hosted on other sites like Springer or ResearchGate and things like that. So if you don't have quick or easy access to the full article, they're doing what's called abstract science, which is they're just reading that little abstract, which is the gist. It's not telling you everything. It's telling you the major highlights. And so if you read the whole article, you get to know how long the study was, how many people were involved in it, what their protocols were, what the control group versus the experimental groups were, what their interpretation of the results were. And then they'll mention their limitations. Our limitations were this, this, and that because of dropout rate and things like that. A lot of that's not included in the abstract. So you're not getting the full picture. You know, so if this might sound great, green tea helps you lose a significant amount of weight. Statistically significant. They lost, 2.2 pounds over a 12-week period, and there were 4 people in the study. Well, that's not great science. That's too many. That's too few people. That's not enough weight over that amount. That's not a significant amount of weight. It is statistically significant, which means that they're 95% or more confident that those 2.2 pounds came from the green tea intervention. Not that it's a significant amount of weight, but that's where you can get this little abstract statement that then turns into pseudoscience in this article. And to try to combat that, one of the best things to do is if you read an article that sounds great, that sounds very intriguing, try to find another article that confirms it. Look up the exact same tagline, headline, whatever, use keywords from what the article was saying and see if somebody else somewhere else has reported very similar things or not. And if only this one source is reporting it, then it's TMZ and you need to leave it alone.
The benefit too of going into the actual article, not just the abstract of the article, is a lot of them have, most of them, they definitely all should, but a lot of them have a discussion section. So if you're new to looking into articles or you don't have a science background at all, you get the author's interpretation of what happened. And so that's way better than Healthline's journalist interpretation of what happens, because their journalist probably doesn't have a science background either, or has a very terrible science background. Or let's not say terrible, less extensive scientific background.
Yeah. Well, and science wants to be funded, so the better the results look, the more chances they're going to get funded for more studies. So, and it's tough because the science does get tricky where if you don't understand it. So for instance, I remember getting into a debate where I'm not a big fan of the hip thruster trend, which is blowing up. Everybody does hip thrusters now. And initially it looked like they were great because everyone was saying that it activates the glute more than squats do. But when you looked at that science, that was based off of muscular electrosignaling. So basically they tested the current the nerve current of activation in the glute, and it was higher in hip thrusts than it was in squats. However, more research has come out looking at the actual growth of the muscle, because just because something is activated does not mean it's growing. Just because something burns or you sweat does not mean you're working hard. So what they found in the newer study was that based off cross-sectional area or the size of the muscle and the hypertrophy, squatting to depth grew almost twice as much muscle in the glute than the hip thrust did. You know, but when you look at the first one and people interpret it and say, oh, more activation, that sounds great, and it looks like this works. Well, that's very in-depth science that the average person that just works out is not going to understand the difference between the activation of the muscle and the growth of the muscle. You know, so that kind of stuff can get, that's why it's important to also use professionals, like have someone that you know you can message that will help you interpret, or have one on your team. It's so astounding to me how many people will not invest in their health. They will not pay a dime for a good scientific dietitian with a master's degree. They will not pay a dime for a strength coach or a movement specialist. You know, they'll go to this one trainer who looks like they want to look and doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. And that person is their nutritionist, their trainer, their therapist, their, you know, life coach, their everything. And it's like, how much are you paying that dude? You know, is your health worth $40 every half hour for twice a week? You know, because that's the investment you're putting into it. And it's underpay and you're getting garbage. You know, like if you want real results, if you want real information, you have to pay for someone that has that information and training, you know, and it's time that we start promoting that people need to pay for that stuff. You know, if someone came up to you and said, oh, your car's broken down, it's probably this, you wouldn't just be like, yeah, you're right. You know, you would challenge that and take it to a professional whose job is to fix car, a mechanic. You know, if someone came up to you and said, oh, that cough, it's probably Corona, you wouldn't be like, yep, it definitely is. You would go to a doctor, you know, but people think that like this guy has abs, so he must know what he's talking about with nutrition. And they just trust any asshole's opinion that wants to give it to them with almost without second guessing. And then they're in over their head and they don't know how to research it and find out the appropriate information. You know, so it starts from pseudo professionals. I mean, I think it sometimes you get it at the professional level, the research level. And then you have the trickle down effect of the media not giving you the full story and giving you their garbage interpretation of it. And then you have, you know, some random trainer who reads that article and gives you the gist of it. And then from there, that client is telling their friends like, oh, my trainer said that gluten causes depression. And it went from 90% of serotonin at a deactivated level is released in the gut to gluten causes fucking depression because of that trickle down effect, where at every level there's some amount of misinterpretation and improper like pseudo science being received and recommunicated. And it's like the game of telephone, where within a few degrees, it's nowhere near what the study originally said.
And I think people, professionals with different certifications, that's one thing. I think the issue actually starts a little bit lower. So for instance, I used to work at Lowe's. I remember some people who were like, oh, you know, I'm taking a shot of apple cider vinegar every day because it helps you lose weight. And then they convince somebody else to do it, who goes and convinces somebody else to do it. And it didn't seem like anybody stopped to question, to go, what do they know? Like, what's their knowledge on the subject that I should just blindly trust them with this, you know? So it's one of those, the bottom of the hierarchy of bullshit is starting with your friends. Your friends are making claims, oh, sugar's bad for you because this, and that. But they went to school for business. Like they have zero nutrition background. They probably don't exactly know what they're talking about. And that's kind of like the basis. And here's the thing. We don't expect everybody to know what they're talking about. This is our own little niche. This is what we're passionate about. If you're not passionate about nutrition, that's perfectly fine. But if you are not passionate about nutrition, you have not looked into it, you don't know anything about nutrition, and you're out here giving advice, that's when we'll start to come after you. Like,
Yeah.
period.
Well, and my question to that is, where did they get that information? You know, I do think the mass spread of it occurs at the bottom of the pyramid, but I think that trickle down effect, somebody somewhere promoted a benefit. As a matter of fact, the website organicfacts.org asked me to be a fact checker for their website, and they sent me some article on losing weight or how to gain weight, and so I don't know, they sent me a couple, and I ripped them apart. Same kind of issue that I had with the carnivore thing, where they had a study linked and it wasn't even close to what they were saying, and they just had a citation there. And there was a few just like fallacies and misinformation. They never got back to me because I destroyed their article, but they have stuff on there about, you know, apple cider, health benefits of apple cider vinegar. And it's one of those things where, like, there's not good science behind apple cider vinegar. What is it? How is it different than any other vinegar other than it's made out of apples? You know, is taking shots of white vinegar great? You know, like, also, what apple cider vinegar are you using? Because there's one that has like the mother in it, which is cloudy and looks disgusting. If you ever tried it, it's the most astringent thing on the planet. Buying the clear bullshit from Publix and saying that you're taking shots of apple cider vinegar is not the same thing. It's like olive oil. Olive oil has great health benefits, but are you buying the $200 a liter fresh press hand sorted olive oil, or are you buying the great value, not really sure where it came from or how old it is olive oil? You know, so the first thing to look at when you see these health claims is the quality of the food that is being assessed. You know, like, it's not just if any amount's good, all of it's good. No, like, that's the issue, is that, yes, for weight loss, it's calories in, calories out. How do you get there? How much does food quality play into that? You know, are you eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, which are going to increase your micronutrient and fiber intake and have your system running properly? You know, because you can eat a lot of food if you have a lot of fiber and micronutrients in your diet and feel full off of not much, or you can eat 16 Oreos and that's your daily. I mean, like, what is your, you know, where's your quality? You know, where's your balance? Where's your information coming from? You know, we need to question more instead of just accepting things. I mean, that's the easiest way to stop misinformation. And we, as a society, are so interested in the quick fix. I got into an argument with someone who made a post, not a dietitian, girl on Instagram, made a post that said how to lose weight fast. And then it was go to her website and use a BMR calculator and yada, yada, yada. And so I commented as a joke and said, how to lose weight fast, don't lose weight fast. And then she commented about looking at, like, I was like, no, I read your whole post, but you're not describing fast weight loss. You're describing traditional weight loss, which is find out how many calories you need and reduce it by 10 to 20% kind of deal. And she was like, so are you saying traditional weight loss can't be fast? And so we got kind of back and forth. And it's like, well, if you lost a pound a week, that would be 52 pounds in a year. That's a lot of weight. That's more weight than most people lose in a year. It doesn't work out that consistently. I'll tell you right now, the research has shown that you typically only lose about 40 to 60% of the weight predicted from those equations. It might say if you cut out 500, and we can get into a whole episode on that science, but if you cut out 500 calories a day, that should be 1 pound a week. However, people don't cut out 500 calories a day, or there's other extenuating factors, or they're not super consistent with it, or whatever it is. But for whatever reason, the predicted is not. It's about 60% at most of the predicted amount of weight that you'll lose. Even still, if you could lose 1 pound a week, every week for a whole year, that's 52 pounds. Most people would be ecstatic to lose that amount of weight. That is not fast. That is 4 pounds a month. You think people are going to be like, oh man, I'm blazing through this weight loss at 4 pounds a month? No, but that's the thing, is like, you're using this tagline of fast to sell it and make it sexy. And fat doesn't lose fast. Fat loses consistently. You know, your body is not trying to do things hastily. And I think a huge part of the problem is creating an end game with health. The end game for nutrition and fitness is to have a quality of life for as long as possible. It is not to have abs. It is not to be a certain weight. It is not to, you know, athletes have more of an end game as far as like, and even still, they're continually going to want to jump fast, jump higher, run faster, you know, perform better. But they have a shorter career span as far as when those things are needed and when they're trying to get better by. But for the average person, your end game is not to cut your calories and lose 30 pounds in a month. You need to take the 1/2 to 1 pound a week for the rest of your time and maintain a weight and lose 50 pounds over a year, year and a half, instead of trying to lose 30 pounds this month. And we need to stop not even just buying into sensationalism or using it to sell our products, but letting people get away with it. You know, part of our responsibility as people who are professionals or just understand human behavior or true health is to call that shit out instead of letting it happen. If they aren't going to respond to you, then they know they're doing something wrong. If they will respond to you and try to become educated, then they actually give a shit about giving out the right information. You know, but you can find out very quickly if you ask questions that goes against what they're promoting and they either are combative, defensive, or don't respond. That's a good way to find out whether or not they're actually promoting this and care about giving you the right information or just trying to sell what they think is right.
And a lot of times the hardest question you can ask is why?
Yeah.
Why? Especially with supplements, which we're going to get into. Don't trust your supplement guy. I used to sell supplements, and that was always when I was trying to push bullshit. People would be like, oh, well, how's it do that? Why does it do that? That's a hard question. And then the problem with selling supplements is eventually you get used to that question, and then you have some strange BS answer that goes over the person's head and they buy it anyway. But if you're trying to figure out if somebody knows what they're talking about or not, ask why. And then it goes back to what Blair was saying earlier. If they can explain it to you in a way that you understand, then they know what they're talking about. If they just talk over your head purposefully because they realize you don't understand, then they're probably not somebody who's trustworthy. But one thing I wanted to get into with, the last episode, we talked about people who call themselves experts, but they might have the level 1 precision nutrition certification. And it's one of those, like, those certifications, they're fine. They have value. They're way cheaper than getting a nutrition degree. I mean, comparatively, it's not even you can't even compare them. It's so much cheaper. It's so much quicker than spending 4 years of your life to go get a nutrition degree. But the problem is, because it doesn't take as long, you're not getting as good of an education on nutrition. The cost, in order to justify the cost, you're not going to have as many resources. And of course, college prices are inflated anyway. We're not going to get into that. But then you have this issue where it's easy to access. It's easy to get into that with those certifications, and everybody's got one. Now everybody's trying to make money, and you've got to outcompete people. And then you end up either overstepping your abilities. You start talking about things you don't know, such as we're seeing a lot of social media marketing, people talking about eating to balance your hormones, which I'm going to get into that when I go after registered dietitians. But they start pushing bullshit, stepping outside of their bounds, talking about things they don't know. And then that's where the issue comes. And that's why you see somebody who's like, oh, I'm a certified nutrition coach. And anybody who knows nutrition rolls their eyes at that and keeps moving. Like, you might have some certification behind you, but you still don't know what you're talking about, just because historically people with that certification have been spouting bullshit. So it has value, but a lot of times they violate their scope of practice. They go beyond what they can do, which significantly decreases the value of that certification.
Yeah. And a lot of it's like, even they're guilty of spreading misinformation. As far as I know, that PN1 still promotes somatotyping. So basically the idea that your body type, meso, endo, or ectomorph, can determine how and when and what kind of weight you store and gain in your body shape. And that's been debunked. So like, you're paying $1,200, $1,500 for this program has the audacity to compare itself to becoming a registered dietitian, and it's promoting things that have been debunked by science. So I say be wary of anybody that calls himself a coach, because I think, and maybe this is our trend this week, I think that coach is a funny way of saying that you're not something. Holistic health coach is a funny way of saying you're not a doctor. Nutrition coach is a funny way of saying that you're not a dietitian. So it's people who maybe have certifications or just think they know what the fuck they're talking about. And I'm not saying that they don't, but they don't have the research background. They don't have the analytical capacity on average to do the same things that someone who is, I had to take courses on counseling. I had to take courses on research interpretation. There's an entire semester long course on how to interpret and understand research. So it's not just, this is the information we think is good for nutrition, now go and promote it to the world. It gives you the tools to understand human behavior. It gives you the tools to analytically decide how new research coming out can be applied and enter the practice. And it's not just, well, I lost some weight, so I can get a weekend certification and call myself a coach, and it's just funny because now we have fasting coaches, and everybody's a coach of something now. And to me, no personal trainer calls himself a training coach. There is a certified strength and conditioning specialist, which would be still not technically a coach, but that's one of like a strength coach would be a CSCS, but they're technically a certified strength and conditioning specialist. They're not a strength coach. I wasn't, when I worked in the NFL, I wasn't a nutrition coach. I was a registered dietitian. I was the team sports nutritionist. The head strength and conditioning coach was a CSCS. Other than that, the coaches were people writing up the X's and O's. They were organizing the team, the offense, the defense, things like that. And I think that, don't get me wrong, there's space, but like part of nutrition is life coaching and sleep coaching and things like that. And I just think that we need to investigate these people before we buy into what they're selling. Somebody who claims to be an expert in too many things is an expert in none. I don't know anybody that is a sleep, gut, nutrition, strength, movement, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone says on their profiles nowadays that they're an expert in like 1 billion fields and they can help you turn your entire life around. And I just don't think that's true. Most people are not an expert of those things within themselves, let alone for other people. So if people are overly promotional of all the things they can help you with, I would be very skeptical. And I think that's what we need in this world, is more skeptical mindsets, because what winds up happening is people buy into their nickel and dime quick fixes so much that they wind up investing more than they would have if they'd have just taken it seriously from the get-go. And now they're burnout. They've reached no goals and they don't want to do anything about it anymore. They're tired of it, and I think that we are still seeing, as much as health consciousness is increasing, so still is the obesity epidemic. So people are not getting healthier because there's more access to health. They're getting more confused and they're nickel and diming themselves into quitting and not seeing any change or improvement. And, I talk to my clients all the time. The hard part is, with the immediate response culture, the solution takes time. With weight, with gaining strength, with losing fat, with becoming healthier, with changing habits, it takes up to 90 days to instill new habits. People don't want to hear 90 days. They want to hear 30 days. People want to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. People want to lose 1,000,000 pounds by the wedding next week. You know, they don't want to do it for the long haul. They want this quick, I can get you where you're going as quickly as possible, as whatever you want to hear, I can do it, is kind of where it's getting to at this point. And we have to find a way to promote that the answer is in slow consistency.
And investigating people is huge too. So not even with somebody who's like a coach of some sort. I saw somebody claiming to be a PhD who was not a PhD. Not only were they not a PhD, they weren't even a PhD candidate. They weren't out here doing research to get their doctoral degree, and they were claiming to be a PhD. And what really rung the alarm bells and told me I should be looking into them is they started talking about that whole eating for your genes bullshit that we talked about earlier. Like, so if that's going on, somebody calling themselves a PhD, which is very easy to figure out that they're bullshitting you, it's definitely going on with these certifications. Like Blair said, look into them, figure out if they know what they're talking about. And if you, and again, like, because we don't expect you to know everything about nutrition. Sorry, my cat's in the litter box making noise. I'm gonna put a pause on that.
Stupid cats.
She decides that she wants to cover it with like the side of the wall, so she ends up scratching the wall and making noise. All right, she should be finished in a second. Damn, how long does it take her to go? All right, so yeah, we don't expect you to be an expert in nutrition, but if something seems funky and you don't know how to investigate it, or you don't know how to weed out whether or not they're a quality professional, that's why we're here. Send us a message on Instagram or send us an email, and we'll surely dive into that, see what's up, see what they're talking about, and explain why we do or don't think that they're quality.
Oh, I love calling out bullshit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Which gets us into the RDs. Oh, this is the issues with registered dietitians is something that I hold very close to my heart, because when I decided, you know what, I do want to become a dietitian, and I transferred from my cell bio degree, my assumption was, oh, okay, dietitians, they're the officially credentialed nutrition professionals. They're the ones that are going to have all the correct information. And I went in thinking that they're infallible, which is doomed to be wrong always. But it's really frustrating, because there's this competition with dietitians, because most of them are trying to take on one-on-one clients. The nutrition field is starting to grow, but we have more dietitians than jobs. And so you can absolutely take on clients, but the way that they do that is the issue that I have. So I have, like, it's a competition between what's truthful, what's trendy, and what's going to make them money. So for instance, the biggest marketing ploy on Instagram with dietitians is, eating right, eating to balance your hormones, which is Cool, that's great. Technically, you can eat to balance certain hormones, insulin, ghrelin, things like that. But what a layperson hears when they're like, oh, I'm going to eat to balance my hormones, they're thinking thyroid hormone. Because everybody, the obesity epidemic is huge. Most people are thinking about weight when they talk about changing their eating habits. So when somebody who doesn't know the ins and outs of nutrition that well, they're immediately going to go to what they want it to be, which is balancing your hormones to lose fat. And they're going to think, oh, cool, I'm going to balance my thyroid hormone. I must have a thyroid issue because I'm eating this, and that. And that is the biggest issue I have, is because you don't know if your hormones are unbalanced unless you test them. And the thing is, people are going to take what these dietitians have on Instagram, these little TikTok videos, which I love TikTok, but everything that's trendy, and a lot of people are just gonna grab it and they're gonna run with it. They're not gonna do that one-on-one coaching. They're not gonna actually pay a professional to help them, and so they're not gonna get the proper education and behavior change and things that they're looking for. And so it's just creating more of a problem in the field, and it frustrates me endlessly. I cannot stand it. It was, like I said, I hold it close to my heart because I went in thinking that dietitians were infallible or above this kind of thing. Like maybe they had figured out how to make the proper nutrition or the proper education fun and sell, but that's not the case. So even with dietitians, if you're following dietitians to get proper nutrition information, there's a high chance that what they're saying is slanted. It's an issue. It's a huge issue.
Yeah. This is something that's very near and dear to me. So I have said for years, I think a lot of dietitians are bad at their job. I think some of it is the fault of the A&D and the CDR, which is that the test has almost nothing on weight loss, on counseling, on sports nutrition. It is primarily geared towards being a clinician. And unfortunately, with clinical dietetics, there's a huge need for it. It's a very important thing, but you don't get long interactions. You maybe see people for 10, 15 days on the upper end, unless people are chronically in and out of the hospital. You're not getting to do real nutrition counseling. You're getting to help them in an acute position, so acute care is not changing anything. It's just not. You can give them some stuff to take home, but you're not dealing with who they are as a person. And food is very emotional. I struggle with obesity. I was diagnosed as morbidly obese growing up. And I have a huge issue with the number of dietitians that are thin girls that never struggled really with weight in their life and tell people to listen to their body. If I listen to my body, if I ate intuitively without putting years and years of training and understanding, I would still be morbidly obese. That's what my body wants. My body is telling me to just eat all the time. It's more often than not, my body feels hungry, so there's a lot of easy things to say where people go into dietetics thinking like, I can tell people how to eat. I can help people eat better. And they're not understanding the struggle, whether that's behavioral or that's biochemical or that's like brain chemistry, which Nick and I did a guest spot on the Behavior and Life podcast on food addiction, which was very interesting, but we just, I just have issues with people making these statements where they think they know everything. They think they know the solution. They think they understand how to get people to change, but they don't understand human psychology. And why are you smiling? What are you smiling
Sorry,
at?
my cat is just came
cat.
into the kitchen and just screeched. She was like, meow. I'm like, thank God I'm going to be muting myself while you're talking and
I didn't
vice
even hear
versa.
it, so fuck
Oh,
that. Fuck your cat anyway. Just leave it.
I just interrupted this for no reason.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. But so yeah, like the issue I have is people think they have the answers. And when it doesn't work based on their equation, you know, when it doesn't work based on what they, and this goes into dietitians rather being right than correct, their immediate response is, well, it's probably your hormones. You probably have insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance, or you should get your thyroid checked. You know, it can't be them and that they're not connecting with this person, or that this person doesn't feel comfortable and is lying to them about what they eat. They see a thin person who's in super great shape and they don't want to be fully honest because there's not a comfortable open honesty that they feel with that person. And it can never be the person, the practitioner. It has to be their hormones or something else. It's not my system, it's your body, is almost what it's come to. And that's why it's so hard, is because it's not just me expert, you change. It's what gets people to the calories in, calories out equation. Yes, it's ultimately calories in, calories out. It's thermogenesis, it's thermodynamics, that is the answer. You will not argue against that. But how do you get there? What makes the most sense? How does your body respond to different things? You know, how do we mentally get you to change? You know, it's sometimes 3-4 sessions in with a client before I even mention starting to track things. You know, before I even mention that we need to buy a kitchen scale and start weighing stuff. Because if they're not ready for that step, telling them they got to start weighing all their food and shit. And often I don't tell people to weigh their food right away. You know, I'm like, oh, we're going to weigh certain foods, you know, but like just telling them how many calories to eat or that fruits and vegetables are healthy. Like people fucking know that. People can go online and calculate their calories. People can go online and research that fruits and vegetables are healthier. It's behavior change. It's understanding where they're coming from and what their struggles are. It's making sure like, it's not just the credentials or the education. It's also the experience and the expertise. And I don't think your own experience counts. I think very minimally it does. Like the experiences that I've gone through have helped me want to learn more about the states of change, the trans theoretical model, things like that come into play. But losing weight does not make you a weight loss expert. Working out does not make you an exercise expert. I don't care if you lose 250 pounds. You are not an expert in losing weight. You know how to make yourself lose weight. And that's it. You don't know anything about helping other people lose weight at all, period. You know, so did me losing weight help me become a dietitian? Yes. Did my experiences get me to where I'm at? Absolutely. But if the only person I've ever helped lose weight was me, I couldn't go around saying I'm a weight loss expert. You know, if I hadn't worked in the NFL, but I'd studied sports nutrition, I can't say that I'm a professional athlete dietitian. You know, I had to do that and get the experience to understand what I want out of my career. You know, so you need to combine understanding, education, and experience. It's not just they have the credentials, so listen to them. It irks me to my core how many people think that just because they went through school or they are a dietitian that they're just going to post shit. And it's like, your job is not just to recommend products. Your job is not just to say what's healthier and that these are the guidelines for things. You know, your job is to meet that person, know who they are, and help them embrace and get ready for a different lifestyle than the one they're currently under that is not satisfying them.
And one thing too, so like Blair said, becoming a dietitian, you have to go through some counseling courses and everything like that. But I mean, everybody's got different opinions on what's hard or not. But for me, at least, this shit's not too hard. Like, I don't think the requirements are as strenuous as they need to be to combat the issues that you're faced with out in the field. Like, and I understand school and education is a vacuum. And so, for instance, I took nutrition counseling last semester. And I mean, you're having case studies every week, and cool, a person's not a case study. There's more variables. But I mean, I feel super arrogant in all of this, but so bear with me. But like, I dominated that course. Like, I had a 97 point something in the course, and then the professor offered extra credit, and I ended up with a 100 in the course. Like, in cool, I've been in undergrad for an extensive period of time, so I have more experience. But I mean, really, for somebody who knows how to learn, it's not that complicated. It's complex. It's a lot of information, but if you know how to learn efficiently and you know how for yourself to learn, you can take it in stride. And a great example is one of my courses. It's an online program, so we have to do discussion posts every week and talk with your classmates and everything like that. Stuff you would do if you were in class. But one of the questions on this discussion post was, where do you get your nutrition information? And the number of people who I saw say Instagram or documentaries is astonishing. It's disheartening. It makes me angry, because you should know enough by this point. This is an upper level nutrition course. I don't even know why that question was even in the discussion. Like, I mean, this is a senior level nutrition course. Why are you asking us where we get our nutrition information? It should be the A&D and research studies, first off. Second off, how the fuck did you get this far and you're getting your information from Instagram? Documentaries? Do you know how many people, like,
you're not allowed to lie on the internet, bro.
Like, I cannot believe you made it this far. And maybe I have these feelings simply because I'm so passionate about it and get so angry about misinformation. How did you make it this far and you still think those are quality sources? That's horrible. That's horrible. And it's so frustrating, and it makes me so mad and so disheartened for the future of dietetics, because the requirements are not hard enough. There's a whole reason why the A&D is requiring dietitians to have a master's degree in 2024.
And I think they're actually discussing moving up to PhD.
Yes, and I think they should. I definitely think they should move it up to PhD. But the thing is, they know that their requirements are not hard enough. Yeah. They know it. And that's shown on the academic level here in undergrad. They want to push people to the master's degree, which I think they should, although I have issues with that too. That's another topic. And I very much think that they should push it to the PhD level, because this shit is not hard enough, period.
I think it should be, if you publish research in your master's, is acceptable. But I think it should be at least a master's or a PhD with published research. Like, I think so like I had a non-thesis option. I didn't have to write a thesis. I had to defend my master's, but I did the internship route, which means that I just had to like take a competency exam from 3 of my professors. So, I think that that's one of the issues, is that people aren't involved enough in research. I was one of the people that if I wasn't in class, I was in my lab, and I helped run like lactate threshold tests and that kind of stuff. I was very fortunate. My master's is actually in exercise physiology with a specialization in sports nutrition, because people were getting masters even in sports nutrition and didn't know enough about exercise to understand the exercise nutrient interaction. So if people were getting a master's degree in sports nutrition that was not exercise phys focused and having to return to school because they were getting into collegiate and professional sports without enough exercise knowledge to understand those interactions, your weekend course, your Instagram follow, your whatever the fuck source you think you're doing is not teaching you enough. I like I mentioned, my master's is in ex-phys, and I don't consider myself an expert in exercise. I know a lot about exercise. I love exercise. I promote exercise, but I'm scratching the surface. My friends who got their degrees in specifically ex-phys or exercise science, or did PhDs in it, can speak over my head without really trying, and it's just one of those, the importance of higher ed is to reach that point where you don't know what you don't know. And people, when they just have a bachelor's, or they just do a PN1, or they just have these quick certifications, walk away thinking they know everything. And they haven't reached that point where they are so thirsty to keep learning, because if you don't read a research study and rabbit hole into 4 more research studies, then you don't have an inquiring mind that makes you the perfect person for this kind of career. You know, every time you read something should make you want to read more, and you should have more questions rather than thinking you have the answer. And that's kind of what happens with the social media nutrition is people post what they think. So nobody posts their whole solution online because they're trying to get you to buy their counseling or their program or their whatever the hell. So you are getting a withheld portion of what they want you to know. And now people are doing, like we mentioned with Frankensteining articles together, they're Frankensteining health together. So they have a bunch of people's half-truths, and they're putting a Band-Aid over a broken bone, and they're not inquiring enough. They're not willing to invest the time, the money, the effort, everything they need to understand a sole source and try to get as much correct information as they can. They have this person's TikTok video, this person's Instagram post, this person's free ebook, and they're like, I have the answer now. It's like, no, you don't. You should have way more questions than answers from grabbing all that stuff.
Yeah, the field is a mess. And like I said, it's not hard enough. It's kind of ironic that the title of this episode is Why Nutrition is So Damn Hard. And part of it is because the curriculum to be a dietitian is not hard enough.
Yeah.
But
that's an actual irony too. Usually people say ironic and they just say things that are coincidental, but no, like that's ironic. That's great.
It's crazy. And I believe 100% that to become a dietitian, you need a doctoral degree of some sort. However, again, I said I have issues with the whole master's degree. That's going to be another episode. But I don't see nutrition and health prevention catching up to the diseases that we have, the obesity epidemic, the critical heart health issue that we have in this country and slowly across the world. Like, I don't see nutrition catching up if they don't completely revamp, and if they don't want to break down their system and start over and make undergrad harder, I think they have to require a doctoral degree.
Well, and so we're going to have to move it along pretty soon.
Yeah.
We're at almost an hour.
We're coming up.
I know some of that's like from the initial setup and it'll be a little shorter, but still this is going to be like an hour and a half long episode. But so the problem is, and it's one of the next notes, which is, I think it's twofold as far as changing the system. One is MDs are worshipped as gods, and they do give nutrition advice, and that's slowly changing. And I think a huge part of that is because we're seeing more women become doctors. Women are better at asking for help than men are.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. That's really ironic because I wanted to put in this anecdote. Greenville Med, they're in the process of increasing their nutrition education. And I met the person who's responsible for incorporating that curriculum into their medical school. And it's actually a woman.
That's not ironic. That's in line.
So,
I mean, yeah, but it's true. Like women are more likely to reach out and ask for help from a dietitian. They're more likely to hire a personal trainer. Go to the gym and just anecdotally look around. When you see a trainer working with someone, it's a woman more often than not. Men are stubborn and think they know and that they can just figure it out. But same thing with nutrition. Most of my clients are women because they're more willing to ask for help. Men have to be pushed by something like I have like athletes that want some consultation because they want to be the best, and they're okay. Well, now this is a component I know nothing about, so let me find someone who knows their shit and buy them. But women as doctors are more likely to say, you know what, we didn't get enough education on this. Like, I know a little bit about nutrition, but let me refer out. Let me have a field of people that I feel comfortable sending you to or sending referrals to or whatever it is. And I think that component is why we're suddenly seeing at least movement in this idea that, like, back in the old days, which is, and that's the thing, is change is very slow. We've mentioned about nutrition, but it's the same about societal things. For the longest time, man doctor, woman nurse, and it was God complex with a bunch of women surrounding him, and he was infallible and his word was what it was. And some of those people are still alive. Those doctors are still practicing. But as we see more women come into the field, women are more likely to refer out and to have other people. That person is not stepping on their toes. They just know more about something else than this doctor does. So I think that mindset is part of why we're seeing a shift in the right direction there. But we also see, because of pharmacology, we do not have preventative medicine for the most part. We have reactive medicine, because that's how you sell drugs and medication. That's how you sell pharmacology, is by having people get sick. Hospitals want people there. Whatever the hospital is, they need people that have heart issues. They need people that have traumatic injuries or whatever their specialty is. Otherwise, they have empty beds and they make no money. And then the same is true for pharmacology. So until that system changes and we promote preventative medicine and we give the preventative type medicine, like nutrition, like movement, like PT, like things of that sort, more weight in the game from a healthcare standpoint, include those in healthcare. I've looked into taking, what's it called? Insurance and HCAs and that kind of stuff as a dietitian. And some of it's like, if they want to use their HCA, their healthcare allowance, they have to have a prescription from a doctor for a medical reason. It can't be because they don't want to gain weight or they want to lose weight. The doctor has to write it for a actual medical condition like diabetes or gout or something of that nature for the HCA to cover it. Wanting to lose weight or have a healthy understanding of nutrition is not covered. So that's a huge part of the problem, is that it's not even, they can't just say like the dietitian's a specialist and I want to see one. The doctor has to prescribe it. So now they have to go to a doctor to get it prescribed. And if it doesn't fall under one of the umbrella reasons to see a dietitian, it won't be covered.
And if you have Medicare or Medicaid, if you have Medicare or Medicaid, if you don't have diabetes or kidney failure, renal disease, you won't get that. Your insurance won't cover it.
No, yeah, it's crazy, but so that's a huge part of the system issue, is that we are seeing a movement in the right direction from a team approach with more female doctors. Huge fan of women as doctors. I think they have better bedside manner more often than not, and they're more willing to refer out to other experts. Obviously, younger generation in general is going to have a better, and I'm not saying all doctors, male doctors and old male doctors, are bad about it, but if we're going to look at averages, my money's on the women. Yeah. But yeah, so I think that the issue is healthcare in general, how it's structured. It's funny too, because so many people were anti Bernie Sanders socialized healthcare, and the issue is we have socialized healthcare. It's just more expensive this way because you pay for it privately. But because of the Hippocratic Oath and the way that our healthcare system works, if someone walks in with no insurance, doesn't pay, they get a bill, they don't pay, your insurance ultimately covers that. It is paid for somehow. So you are paying for socialized healthcare. It's just not the way you thought. So it would be cheaper overall for everybody, and more things would be covered, and preventative health would start to take an explosion if we just went ahead and voted it in. But instead we're like, no, you know who kept non-socialized healthcare? Healthcare. Yeah. Insurance companies. And they were the biggest lobbyists for that kind of stuff. And it lost, but I don't think people understand that you are paying for your healthcare goes up every year because you're paying for those gaps in medical bills, because you're paying for the shit that slips through the cracks, the people that get treated but don't have healthcare, yada, yada, yada. Yes, I get it. It goes on their record and they get sent to a collection agency and blah, blah, blah. But you are still paying for it because they aren't. Every time a homeless person gets treated in the hospital, you are paying for it through your healthcare.
And sometimes not even like if it's a homeless person who needs healthcare. So for instance, January 2019, late January of 2019, my mom's boyfriend ended up choking and dying. He was dead for 20 minutes. He was revived But he was dead for 20 minutes. There was all this brain damage. I mean, when you're dead for that long, shit goes south. So he was able to be revived. He was in a coma for 2 weeks, a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. He was in the ICU for 2 weeks after he woke up before he got stepped down. And even afterwards, for a year and a half, he was still going to the hospital to run these tests, to get this surgery, to get that and the other. But some of it was experimental because he was an extreme case. And the thing is, they said, they were like, look, they couldn't afford it. It was expensive ass shit. And the hospital said, you know what? Pay X amount of money. We got the rest of it. All these extensive tests, all these different surgeries that we're doing because we think they're going to work, but you're such an extreme case. The hospital was like, you know what? You ain't got to pay for it. Somebody's paying for it. I promise the hospital's not paying for it. That'd be against their own interest. They want to make money. So either the government is paying for it, and being that they're cutting edge procedures, I'm sure they were getting a portion from the government, and they were getting a portion from everywhere else that they get their funding. So
well, and those costs are jacked up because they expect people like insurance to cover it. It's a circle jerk where like they're all just paying each other in a circle, and if you say you're going to pay cash, most hospitals will take a huge chunk off. It's like they'll give you a discount, but really that's closer to the actual price.
And it's still overinflated.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we could go on for days and days about that.
Oh yeah, so, this could be a 4-hour podcast. Let's go into the trend.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to say there, but I think people often do things based on their perception without true understanding, as we're kind of noting throughout this episode, is that people are going to decide something, whether it's about nutrition or healthcare or whatever. They're just like, well, this is what I perceive to be, so this is how I'm going to believe that it is. And I think that's really what we're trying to highlight is quit making up your mind and open your mind. Like with nutrition science, one of the youngest sciences out there, things that were true no longer are. Things that aren't true may be, but that's the thing is we are growing so much, and it's such a case by case and how good the study is and blah, blah, like closing your mind or making up your mind about something in such a delicate and ever evolving field is a huge part of the problem. So avoid sensational shit, avoid things that people just saying like, one size fits all kind of stuff. It's just not, it's never going to be that case ever, and there's going to be new information coming to light. There's going to be things that look good, and then when they're broken down and dissected or not, and the other way around, so be open-minded about all this and how it's going to change and evolve over the time.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to go into our trend. So it's kind of a little late to talk about this, but at around New Year's, everybody remembers hearing about Lizzo and her 10-day smoothie detox. But this absolutely applies in the hierarchy of bullshit, because who thinks Lizzo knows what she's talking about nutritionally? Why would we trust that source? The number of people who went and did some sort of juice cleanse to detox their body, blah, blah, blah. Why? We really think that she knows? Like, sorry, cats jumping.
I don't know who Lizzo is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's a rapper, pop star, one of the two. Anyway, she's really the face of the body acceptance movement, or was, until this detox. And they were like, oh, well, that's not body positive, things like that. We're not going to get into that. We did an anti-diet episode already, but like, who thought Lizzo knew what she was doing with the 10-day detox? And I mean, you can make the argument that she has the money to hire a proper professional, but just go straight to the professionals.
Well, the article even says done in consultation with a nutritionist and based on the popular book 10-Day Green Smoothie Cleanse. But it does not say dietitian. It says nutritionist.
That's the one of the defining differences between nutritionist and dietitian is anybody with a nutrition background or actually anybody can call themselves a nutritionist in most states.
Florida, it was illegal, but I think they changed it.
Yeah. You cannot legally call yourself a dietitian unless you are a dietitian. And then the other one, this is still a little bit late, but it applies exactly. Jillian Michaels she's a celebrity personal trainer, again, celebrities, but she came out with a YouTube video that was like, oh, too much protein is bad for you because it leaches calcium from your bones, which sounds great. That's outdated. That's an outdated claim. Like Blair said, nutrition, some of the stuff in the early days of the field of nutrition is no longer true because we've found that, well, that's not true. So it's one of those, the bullshit's out there. People mean well sometimes they don't, but that's why nutrition is so damn hard, is because people are looking to individuals who aren't healthcare professionals, who aren't nutrition professionals specifically for this information. And that's what makes it so fucking hard.
So the Jillian Michaels thing was funny because she has been one of the more well-known nutrition celebrities, I guess, for a while. But if you watch the video, she's like, oh, there's all kinds of bad stuff that happens. I'm not going to get into it. And it's so goes back to one of my original points, which was if you can't explain it, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But mention that it's bad for your kidneys, which we did in one of our original episodes, and we can bring up again, is there's actually no research other than with having advanced stage kidney disease without any sort of a dialysis. Too much protein can be an issue, but for the most part, protein was fine and can actually help repair organ tissue. But there's been studies on people consuming 6 times the current RDA for protein, and it's shown nothing but benefits, actually. So just saying things without explaining them is garbage. Just because she's well-known and famous doesn't mean that she knows what she's talking about. And she was unable or unwilling to explain why protein was bad for you. So.
And then even then, when she was asked to debate about it, it wasn't she'll debate. It was like, oh, I'll her science team or whatever, some science professionals, get them and they'll debate Lane Norton. So because he's big on debating people, that's his thing, is
he called her out
people online.
She didn't respond. Yeah.
And
so the Lizzo thing too. I just a quick Google search.
Yeah.
The author of the book, the nutritionist and 10-day detox, whatever diet book, JJ Smith. So it literally just now within this conversation, I Googled this and found it. It took me less than a minute. JJ Smith is the American author of the New York Times bestselling book, 10-Day Green Smoothie Cleanse. Graduated from Hampton University with a degree in mathematics and pursued a career in the IT industry. And apparently because of swallowing one of her silver fillings and says she recovered from mercury poisoning due to swallowing one of her silver fillings. And it says, note, silver fillings cannot cause mercury poisoning, as metallic mercury is non-toxic when consumed according to the CDC and poison control research. So the whole reason she quote unquote got into it is apparently bullshit. Decided to become a certified nutritionist and weight management expert.
Remember what we said about
no degree,
people calling themselves experts?
Yeah, people that are experts don't call themselves experts, but just decided that after making up a bullshit reason why she had mercury poisoning, decided she's an expert on weight loss and has people going on smoothie cleanses, so this girl has a degree in mathematics and is now calling herself a nutritionist. That's not even biochemistry. It'd be understandable if she had a degree in biology and just, those are close enough that I could be like, okay, you've probably taken some biochem classes, maybe even metabolism. It's just astounding to me that this person is in the limelight and Lizzo is seeing her and she's selling books and people are buying it and buying into it. And she
may have paid Lizzo to do the detox anyway.
Yeah.
That's always a possibility.
That's why it's good to do your research, even quick research.
Any
Her book has
research is better than none.
24,000 ratings.
Damn. But, and with that,
we're done.
Yeah.
We're putting our hands
Yep.
up. Yeah, washing our hands
Yep.
with it.
So, but
yeah, so I mean, 10 days is not enough to change anything.
yeah,
I mean, like we mentioned, it takes up to 90 days to change habits. 10 days, it's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
You might lose weight because you don't have any food in your system. But yeah, so please go ahead and share for us, tell your friends about it, like, subscribe, comment on any of our videos, or send us an email or message on Instagram if you want to hear something about a certain topic. If anything we said intrigues you, we're open to discussion. Might want to consider making a Facebook group so people can come in and join, and that may be a good
That's
idea.
a good
But
idea.
so yeah, we're going to promote and start moving this thing, and we're very open to feedback and information and suggestions, requests, debates, whatever you want it to be. So like I mentioned, I'm a registered dietitian with a master's degree. My company is called the Human Element Nutrition, hence the name of the podcast. We are currently launching a program for small colleges and high schools to offer affordable sports nutrition. It's called the Athletic Advantage Sports Nutrition Program. We're targeting smaller schools like Weber International, Abilene Christian. If y'all are listening, give me a call. But yeah, so trying to bring sports nutrition. When I was with the Dolphins, I noticed that some of the guys had never seen a dietitian, and they went to bigger schools like Clemson, and not to mention the guys that went to like Liberty and these little schools. So if it's not the most accessible thing at those schools, then the guys that don't, all they have is a strength coach, they're definitely not getting any access to nutrition. So the idea is to bring access to sports nutrition and performance nutrition to guys before they make it to the next level, or help them make it to the next level, or whatever their goals are, to at least, lay a foundation. So that's my main motivation right now. I do one-on-one counseling and community nutrition as well. But, if you are interested, website, humanelementnutrition.com. Email is humanelementnutrition@gmail.com, and Instagram is at the Human Element Nutrition.
Yep. And for me, you can find me on Instagram at hion_health. So that's HION_health. And for Twitter, it's the same handle without the underscore. So shoot me a message, ask me questions, talk shit to me. I don't care. Just
I have a Twitter now. I need to start using it.
Yep. Blair's got Twitter. So
what is it? Human Element RD, I think is my Twitter. I don't know.
There we go. And as always, don't forget to give us that sweet 5-star review.
Yeah, 5-star review, like, subscribe. I think we have a listener contribution thing that posts down there at the bottom too. So if you wanna just send us money, that's fine. Yeah. We enjoy that.
We should compare that to Patreon.
Yeah,
that's
well, Patreon, aren't you expected to put out a bunch of extra content and stuff like that? Yeah, maybe. I mean, we could do some lives, do live videos and whatnot, or whatever, but
we'll see.
Yeah. So once we get this, we're going to try to post every other Thursday. The first and third Thursday of the month is our goal. So two episodes a month. Try to keep them to like an hour. This one is probably gonna be like an hour and a half, but somewhere plus or minus 30 minutes of an hour, usually plus. But yeah, so that's our goal. Like I said, please interact, send us messages, comment, like, subscribe, share, do whatever you can. We're doing this just for fun and to try to help spread, good intention with nutrition and human health. So
fix the issues we see in the world.
Yeah. Take it easy, bozos.
See you later.